This is the Gutsy Health Podcast with Janique and Tristan Roney. Hey guys, welcome back to the Gutsy Health Podcast. We have a really exciting episode for you. I want to introduce to you our two guests that are here with us today. So we'll first start with Shannon, who is calling in from California. So Shannon, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Shannon Kinnett. I am excited to be recording this podcast with you guys.
And Shannon, you and I met. You did the blood work with us, and that's how we became friends. And then we started following each other on Instagram. And I love everything you post. You're a stay-at-home mom of two boys, one on the way, and everything you post is so intelligent and so intellectual and so thoughtful, and you're not afraid to go down really dark rabbit holes. And so I will introduce to you guys in a little bit why I begged her to come on here. But let's go to our second guest, who is Liza. And she's just Liza, like Beyonce.
Just Liza. Not like Beyonce, but just
Liza. Liza, please introduce yourself. And when I came up with this idea, I'll tell you guys the story in a little bit, but when I came up with this idea to do this episode, I was like, Liz is my wordsmith. She's so smart. Like, she knows all these controversial issues, like back to front. I'm like, she needs to be on here. So Liza, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Hi, my name is Liza, and I don't like authority.
So
I love that so much. Yeah. That is the perfect introduction.
And you guys, Tristan's here too.
And I'm also here, and I'm going to be taking more of a backseat role on this one. My job is to listen and to chastise all the men listening every now and then. But that's basically going to be my role.
We want to, okay, so I had to, you guys, our episode, okay, let me back off. I had to beg Tristan to be a part of this episode because he's like, no, this is a female space. Like, women need to talk about this. And I said, no, you need to, what's the word I'm looking for? Show other men. You need to model for other men what holding space for women looks like. You know, it can't just be women holding space for women. Men have to learn how to hold space for women too. We need allies in all shapes and forms and colors. So
as soon as she said modeling, I was like, oh yeah, okay.
Like,
sign me up for the modeling.
Professional model.
So I'm really excited I get to be a part of this because it is actually surprisingly rare that you get an opportunity to listen in and be a participant without taking over as a man, right? Because that's sort of the expectation in so many circles that if you're there, you're in charge, and that's so wrong. Mm-hmm. And we don't do a good enough job of listening. Yeah. So this is hopefully the most I talk for the whole episode.
So I want Shannon to share in a little bit what was going through her head. The episode is basically about women who do not have credentials, and they also don't have any space in the health realm. Like, for some reason, there are not a lot of women in this space that are not doctors, don't have Ph.D s, or they're not M.D s. And so how this came up was Shannon was listening to our last episode on, which one was it, you guys? Turf Wars, yeah, Information Turf Wars.
Yep.
And Tristan and I were listing off a bunch of men that weren't doctors, but had created these health empires. And Shannon messaged me and she said, I love this episode, but you didn't mention any women. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't. Like, who are the women in this space that aren't doctors, but are creating health empires? And you guys, there's not a lot. Like, there's not a lot of women out there that are as big as the Ben Greenfields and the Chris Cressers. And who else did we mention, you guys?
Mark Sisson and Dave Asprey.
Yep.
Exactly. So Shannon, what was going through your head when you were listening to that episode?
I kind of bring it back to when I was still working in kind of the corporate world, and I guess calling it corporate, so a little upselling it. I've always been in the startup world. So
mm-hmm.
Things that like they kind of have buttoned down in the corporate world just are crazy in the startup world when it comes to gender bias and gender dynamics,
mm-hmm.
and just this kind of like unconscious bias that exists in the workplace. So it's something that I became pretty like acutely aware of when I was working was, amount of talk time that women get over men. The amount of times women will get interrupted in conversation.
Totally.
And it like brought me down this kind of like, where does all of this come from? Like rabbit hole. And it brought a lot of attention to me, even, you know, as a woman. I found that I even was more inclined to be comfortable. If I really had to get a word in, I would be more comfortable, I guess, I definitely unconsciously, but stepping on the toes of another woman finishing her sentences versus a man.
A man.
So, yeah, like I got really kind of nerdy and went down the rabbit hole on unconscious bias. And a lot of what I kind of discovered there is, you know, women have to be a lot more secure and have a lot more validation. And this is a broad sweeping statement. So there are certainly women who don't require this, you know, extra security and they have all the confidence in the world and they can go out and do it. But generally speaking, I think women need to be 100% confident that what they're about to say is valid, that it's, you know, worthy of being heard, that it's backed by science, or you know, whatever platform you're speaking in.
Totally.
And I have seen that a lot in the health space, and I've been noticing it, even, you know, before the Turf Wars episode, that there are a lot of men who can make really bold statements.
Yep.
And specifically men that are not credentialed, men that are just like these wonderful women out here who are just
who are saying the same thing.
Yeah, totally. And they're really, you know, doing their research and they're knowledgeable. And I have faith that they're, you know, speaking from a place of integrity and they believe it. But a lot of the times you'll see a man go out and say something that's just like kind of a shocking claim in like a health regard. And, you know, my statement's based on this peer reviewed literature or this, you know, journal or this study of X number of people. Whereas I believe women in this space, I mean, I see Instagram posts where there are, you know, full captions continued in comments with just citing sources after they make a somewhat harmless claim, like eat more vegetables, right?
Yes,
like, so
I can't tell you
where it came from.
I can't tell you how many times I have been told I am a dangerous person for preaching to people to eat more vegetables. I mean, tens of times. I can't say hundreds of times, but like literally weekly, there is some professional out there in a health industry that is trying to tear my claims down. And I'm like, well, go research it then, you know, like how is telling parents that feeding your child more vegetables is bad for them, you know, like how do I gain? What do I profit from teaching people this? Like I said in my last podcast episode, I'm not a CEO of like sugarless candies. You know what I mean? Like I do not have my, my $1 billion business where I'm selling something. So anyways, but yes, there is this massive divide basically where, us women and you see women arguing against women as well. You know, it's the gatekeepers. And how, why, where did this start from? Liza, jump in.
Oh my gosh. How much time do we have?
So much. Go.
I like, as a stay-at-home mom who has like really mundane tasks over the last, you know, decade and a half, I've had an enormous amount of thinking time.
Yeah.
And so
that's like, dangerous. That's really dangerous.
My brain is a rabbit hole. I'm like, I don't know if you want to go down there.
No, that's why you're here.
That's why you're here.
Share it.
I mean,
wordsmith us to
so this is
intelligence.
This is a global, all-encompassing problem, right?
Yeah.
Like, and we are seeing, so in my personal, unprofessional opinion, because I don't get paid to have this opinion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hence unprofessional. Yeah, that's all we have here.
But it's mine. There's a major shift in consciousness going on right now because we see these systems that have been put into place for the last several hundred years that the fruit of is destruction. And people are not enjoying being a part of the downfall of systemic problems that are leading to a lot of chaos, a lot of depression, a lot of isolation, a lot of anxiety, a lot of health crises, a lot of health crises, a lot of monetary crises, a lot of relationship crises. So I think in those moments where things aren't going well, it's human nature to think, how did we get here? And what can I do to prevent this?
Yeah.
So we kind of do the backlog of, well, let's see all the milestones that brought us to this place in this moment of crisis. And then what can we do to pull out of this?
Yeah.
And that's where we are.
Exactly.
Right. And that's where we are globally. So what I feel like we are seeing is a patriarchal, like systemic problem of recognizing that the people who have been experts and authority figures for centuries don't have our best interest in store.
Yeah.
They have their own best interest in store. So
Right.
they are here to build empires on the backs of the masses.
Yeah.
And we have enough technology and enough education and enough smarts for the masses to gather and speak to each other online.
Like we're doing right now.
Like we're doing right now. And we kind of find each other, like we
Yes.
move past the shame, the fear, the things that are preventing us from being honest.
Yeah.
And then we find each other and we're starting these conversations of, hey, I'm not cool with this anymore.
Yeah.
So that's what's happening everywhere.
Yeah.
In the medical field, I mean, you can't separate what's happening in agriculture and medicine
Yeah.
and education and government
Yeah.
and even in intimate families,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And so we've been taught, especially because in America, it's a very machine-like, factory-like mentality. And there's a sense of we're like born and bred to be a part of this matrix.
Yeah.
And it's rather soulless. It really
Super.
demands that we negate our own reality. We negate our own emotional experiences, and we negate, it's not even a sense of intuition. It's just a sense of our own personal autonomy and our own personal sovereignty.
Yeah.
So we are taught through the school system and through our family systems that we are to outsource our decision-making to people who have more expertise than we do.
Yep.
And it's turned into...
So, yep. And so we switch off our own,
Right.
like, intuition, basically, our own gut feelings
Right.
to rely on authority.
Right. And the gaslighting, the amount of gaslighting that happens from experts and authority figures
Yeah.
to deny people's lived experience
Yep.
is problematic and systemic. And we see very harmful, real consequences from this.
Right.
So people are not getting the diagnosis that they need. They're
Right.
living in chronic disease states. They are told that they're not in pain, that it's psychosomatic.
Well, and our diseases are changing dramatically. We're going more and more into these obscure autoimmune diseases that when you go to a doctor and you tell them your symptoms and you don't fit in a box, then what do they tell you? Like, oh, it's all in your head, right? And that's especially true for women. But what's even worse is it's especially true for Black women. Statistics have shown if you're a Black woman, like your doctor's less willing to listen to you and sympathize with you. But if you're a woman versus a man, your doctor won't listen to you as much as he would another man. So it is this systemic kind of inability to be sympathetic to women and to our experiences because we're hormonal, right? It's that time of the month, or, it's all of these excuses. And we use those excuses to not listen to each other.
Yeah.
Sorry, I kind of went off track, but as I was saying, we are no longer like all of these new diseases, these stealth pathogens, these autoimmune things that are all linking to each other, all of these gut dysfunction things that are causing these other symptoms that nobody understands. Like it's a real thing and doctors can't recognize it. Therefore, it doesn't exist. And that needs to stop. And so that's what people like us are trying to do out there right now. And so, sorry, Liza, I
Don't
I
apologize.
Keep going.
Preach.
So
Keep going.
no,
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think a lot of times what I've seen, and even in my own personal experience, is if you come in and you say, I'm experiencing things that to one person might present as, like you said, an autoimmune, or, let's do a deeper dive and see how all of your total blood count, all of your levels are, just to somebody who is maybe not as invested in your overall health will just present as symptoms of like depression. So, I think women are so frequently diagnosed, and, this is so close to me because I've had so many children, or not so many, but I've had kids so close together, and now I'm pregnant again. But even just going into my doctor for an annual saying, hey, I don't feel completely right. I feel good, not great. I have brain fog and occasionally having digestive issues, and just really going down a list of like, where do you think we should start? Where do you think we should start looking? And a female doctor who she has kids herself, she looks at me and she goes, these are classic symptoms of postpartum depression. And the immediate reaction was, let's get you on Zoloft. Or I can't even remember what it was that she offered, but I was thinking, I've been really aware of my, mental health being at the time a working mom. And I told her like all of my practices that I've been doing is like, why wouldn't we start with like, what's your mindfulness practice like? What's your diet like? Why are we not going there? And, I think there's a really easy opportunity for doctors to just quickly brush it off as, oh, just another hysterical woman, just another woman with depression or another overloaded, overwhelmed mom. Whereas my husband, very equally overwhelmed. My husband is a really equal partner in the household, and I'm so lucky to be able to say that. And, I think if he were to go into the doctor and say, hey, doc, I'm feeling symptoms of brain fog and digestive distress, and, I'm not really feeling myself, I don't know that the initial reaction would be, I think you have depression. Right. It would probably be like,
let's check your testosterone or something.
Right. But I guess kind of what I wanted to bring light to here is how gender dynamics are playing like a pretty big role in all of the health and wellness space, not just like classical allopathic medicine and the relationships you have with doctors and how women interface with, both male and female doctors and all of that, but also as a consumer, as, everybody is a consumer, as a person who has a social media account, how's my bias and how am I, interpreting information that's shared by women versus men? And are we given a fair shot, and are we giving each other a fair shot?
Totally.
I don't know.
I know in my experience, like I subconsciously will gravitate towards men. And this is my own subconscious hypocrisy because I do look for doctor authorities. I do look for them spouting off research. If I came across another person like myself on the internet spewing off nutritional advice, I'd totally brush past them, because I'd be like, who are they? What do they know? You know what I mean? But what my space, and I'm just going to talk about what I try to do on the internet. If you're a new listener to the podcast, my goal is to help women, especially stay-at-home moms, empower themselves and advocate for themselves and their children. And I try to do that by educating them about health and wellness, because no one has ever paved the way for just us normal moms, right? People who don't have degrees, people who don't have PhDs or MDs in health and wellness. Like no one has ever given us the permission to take our power back. No one. Yet we are all drowning. We're all just drowning in this system that takes away everything from us, takes away our intuition, takes away our gut feeling, takes away our ability to make choices, right? Because you're sick. Like, let's say your child just gets an ear infection. Everyone's knee reaction is to just go to a doctor and get antibiotics, right? Well, why don't we just slow down as moms and like pay attention to the symptoms and the signs, do a little bit of research, and, maybe they don't have to go to the doctor today or tomorrow or something. Now, if you're listening out there, I'm not telling you to not go to your doctors. But what I am saying is 80% of ear infections is viral, but 100% of them are treated with antibiotics. So little gems of knowledge like that could really save your child's gut biome and their immune system down the line. You know what I mean? So I think there is this new age and this new era. I mean, like this concept of self-advocating for ourselves is really catching fire because we're so hungry for it. Because us women with our bizarre health symptoms that no one can figure out, we're so thirsty for knowledge. We're so thirsty for anything to help us in the right direction. But when we start to go down these rabbit holes of education, of self-empowerment, what happens?
Pretty easily minimized and dismissed.
Completely, right? Have any of you guys ever experienced that?
Constantly.
Okay, so share some stories.
I mean, I remember my very first baby was born in the hospital. And I was a new mom and I was young, mid-20s, and I was just doing what everybody else was doing. So, and I thought I was really educated because I thought I was asking all the right questions.
Yeah.
Right? So I went to my doctor, who was just a family practitioner and who also delivered babies, and remember talking to him in a couple of my prenatals and talking about episiotomies and my options and different things like this. And he's like, well, it's policy, blah, blah, blah. And
Is it?
I've noticed that this happens, blah, 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 you know? And so I just remember being like, well, okay. I mean, you've done this hundreds of times.
Yeah, you're the expert.
Like you've delivered hundreds of babies and I haven't delivered any. So yeah. And then my second baby, I actually was short story. A long story made short. We didn't have any insurance anymore because my husband moved to a startup company with no insurance, and an epidural was like $2,000. So I was just thinking,
it's a lot of money.
It's
for
a
an
lot of
epidural.
money.
Oh my
It's a
gosh.
lot of money for an epidural. So I was thinking, if I could give birth without an epidural, then I could save $2,000. And like if I wanted to spend a quarter of that or half of that on me, I'd still be saving $1,000, and I could just have $1,000 to go do something awesome.
Yeah, right.
Right. So
Get a doula or something.
Right, so that was my challenge,
exactly.
right? So I went to like a Hypnobabies birthing class, and that's when I started getting information and education outside of the system. And that was my first experience with information outside of the standard.
Outside of the system.
Outside of the system. And my mind, like every week, my mind was just blown wide
Shattered.
open.
I remember
I had
that.
no idea that this was a thing.
Right.
I had no idea this was a possibility. I had no idea that these two things connected.
Yeah.
I had no idea that that's how my own body worked.
Yeah.
Because no one, and it's embarrassing to admit that, right? When you're an adult woman who is pregnant with her first baby and you feel like you're tracking your cycles and you're all grown up and you're making your own money and everything's fine. And then somebody tells you about your own body. And it's just that gap in information we are not telling each other.
Yeah.
It's probably fair to say your doctor didn't know that about your body either, even though that was literally his job.
Well, look at the medical text, right? I mean, look, the standard is the male body. The standard is constantly the male body. I remember just a few weeks ago, the internet exploded with female anatomy, like muscle tissues. And, everyone's like, oh, like breast tissue looks like a flower. Like nobody had ever visually seen that before because we don't, right? Because we're and we equate it to sexuality and we equate it to all these things that have nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And so when you're in a female body experiencing this world and the standard is male, where are you going to have any kind of representation of your own lived experience?
Yeah.
There's
inside the medical world.
There's an article I just read today where they've discovered that there are fundamental differences in the brains of female mice versus male mice.
Wow.
And that's huge because they've been doing research using mice on neurology and brain function for decades, probably over a century, without knowing that and assuming that a brain is a brain is a brain.
Yeah.
And now we have to go back and reconsider every single brain study that's been done using mice to see, does this actually apply to women in the same way as it does to men?
So I actually have a pretty relevant, personal experience story to share about science versus authority.
Yeah.
So when I was in my third trimester of my pregnancy with my second, Jack, I contracted CMV, cytomegalovirus, which is a really common virus. Based on what I've been told and what I've read, most people get CMV, they brush it off as, a flu, or they just go in to see their doctor and they're just diagnosed with the flu. And it's just totally something that a proper functioning immune system and in a non-pregnant, non-immunocompromised person, not a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, because I was pregnant, I had really, really horrible symptoms of this virus. And it was after many failed flu tests where everybody was telling me, you have to have the flu. This is definitely the flu. I took 3 different flu tests. And finally, they're like, okay, let's look into what else this could be. And they did some blood draws and some titer testing and discovered that I had cytomegalovirus. And that was, a primary infection late in pregnancy, so it was less, kind of threatening or scary than had I gotten it in my first trimester.
Right.
But I had about 7 or 8 weeks left in my pregnancy. It was very early third trimester. And of course, after I recovered, my first kind of question for my midwife and the medical team that I saw that I was working with, the neonatal infectious disease team at the hospital, was, what's the risk? What is the risk that this passes to the baby? And what is the plan of action from there? And I heard from the neonatal infectious disease team, what's the kind of percentage chance of it passing, and what the plan would be if he did come back with a positive congenital CMD test or diagnosis, and all of these different things. And of course, I spent the remaining 7 or 8 weeks of my pregnancy pouring through all of the research that's been done on congenital CMD, on treatment options, on all of the different things that would happen or could happen. And I had a lot of research, time before having my son. And I knew the plan would be, okay, they're going to test him, right there. They have to get the first urine and they're going to test him. And if it comes back positive, we're going to see, are there other symptoms of, is he symptomatic or asymptomatic? So are there other symptoms of this virus? And, did he pass his newborn hearing screen? He did. By the way, he was born 9 pounds, 5 ounces.
Wow.
Perfect APGAR score.
Yeah.
Big,
he was
healthy
perfect.
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. He passed his hearing test. He's came out ready to eat, doing good. And all of a sudden, with this positive urine test, he would have a positive diagnosis from the urine test of congenital CMD. But everything else was great. And all of a sudden, I had a team of pediatric infectious disease doctors telling me that they needed to take my baby into the NICU. Yeah. And I was challenging that and saying, why do we need to take an asymptomatic baby into the NICU? And the fact that I even said asymptomatic, they're like, are you a nurse?
How dare you use words like that?
It's a really big word, lady. Do you have a degree to use that word?
Right.
Like a self-educated, really kind of passionate about figuring this thing out mom. And it started with just one doctor. Oh, we need to take him into the NICU. We need to do this. And I said, I'm actually very comfortable with the plan that we have with our pediatrician.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that. And then, of course, my husband leaves to go shower after, being in the hospital. He leaves me there with a newborn. And
oh, dear.
They send 6 different doctors into my room.
Oh my gosh! With your husband not there either.
Rotating. Exactly.
Oh my
and I mean,
gosh.
is this really coincidental timing that my husband's not here, or is this, I don't know. That's the kind of thing that goes through my mind. It's like, oh, we need to get a baby into a NICU, or not take the exhausted mom who's been up shoving peer-reviewed journals in our face all night and not sleeping because she's feeding a newborn baby. Why don't we ask her then to take her baby into the NICU when her husband's gone?
And how do you know what a peer-reviewed journal is, Shannon? How do you know that? Sorry, keep going. I'm being snarky.
But really, these are the kinds of things they're asking me, all these different, luckily, this is my second child. And had it been my first, I think things would have gone a lot differently.
Right.
I learned a lot, through, unfortunately, trial and error with my first. And thank God it's been part of my kind of awakening journey. But I think it's just so interesting how you have the doctors that come in, especially the specialists that come in and will say, I had so many specialists tell me, I understand that the American Association of Pediatrics, the National Institute of Health, the Center for Disease Control, all of these credible people say, do not treat an asymptomatic baby with a congenital CMD diagnosis. Do not treat.
Yeah.
But if it were my kid, I would treat. If it were my kid, I would do it. And I'm sitting there thinking, am I supposed to respect that you would treat because you're a doctor? What does that say to all the other things that contradict what you're saying to me?
Exactly. And so
it's a long story, but
so you were able to keep your child at a NICU, right?
What happened? But that was it. That was a process. I mean,
it was the bullying. They try to bully you into it.
Oh yeah. So they actually transferred me.
Wow.
They transferred me to a different hospital because I said, I'm not letting my baby out of my sight.
You got fired.
Wow. Good for you.
Well, thank God.
Now, there are a lot of women sitting here probably like, oh my gosh, can we do that? And I want to say, yes, you can. Like,
Yes,
you
you
absolutely
can.
can do these things.
Please do these
Like,
things.
so I came across a lady who was like 75, 80 years old, and she looks like she's like 50. And she was telling me her story of how she was deathly ill in her 20s, like suicidal, just so sick. And she found someone, I'm trying to shorten this story. She found someone who taught her how to be an expert at her health, and she healed herself. But one of the things I'll never forget is that person told her, you know, Jane, everybody needs to be their own expert in their health. And that is absolutely true. We all need to be experts. Like we have to. In this day and age where there's so many bizarre health issues going on, there's so many laws that are against us that hinder our ability to heal and repair and to have healthy lifestyles. Like we need to be super sleuths in these areas so that we can advocate for ourselves and our children, and we can see and make decisions to prevent long-term health issues, right? Like we all need to be experts. And so when you hear Shannon's story like this, yes, you can do that too. Like not only can you, you should. And I want to give you guys the courage to do that.
And this is where things really do diverge between your average male experience and your average female experience. Because as a man, as a boy even, I was taught that I had the right to do this sort of a thing, that I could take control over my own experience and that I could stand up to authority and become an expert and say, this is what I'm doing, right? I was taught that. Women are generally not taught that, right? They're taught to accept the authority of others and to do what they're told. And so you have to, as women, you have to overcome a whole lifetime of training about what is acceptable and what is not.
Yeah.
And if there's one nice thing about systems of privilege and oppression, it's that they tend to mirror each other in different areas. So the male privilege in one area can turn into authority oppression in another, right? So as a male, I've got some really good natural privilege that helps me in a general situation. But when it comes to interacting with medical professionals, right, I experience more of the oppression side because I don't have the letters after my name that give me authority. Yeah. And that helps me to develop a sense of compassion and empathy for people who experience oppression in areas where I typically experience privilege. And so hopefully people out there who are listening who maybe are not relating very well to a lot of what's been said because you're not an uncredentialed woman who has to kind of deal with all this stuff. Hopefully you can find some areas in your life where you have experienced oppression, right? For me, it was being a cancer patient and basically being a guinea pig for the medical professionals to say, okay, we're going to do this next.
Right.
And for almost a year, me saying, well, you're the professional. I guess that's what I do, even if it didn't feel right.
And we would try to interject some change in that. And they would be like, oh, well, we might consider that later.
Yeah. Getting the message over and over again that my input was
not
useless, right? That, oh, you're just an uncredentialed chump. So thank you for sharing your opinion. Now go back to your corner so we can do our jobs. Right. And that was extremely valuable for me in understanding more of what people go through. And then seeing Janique go through childbirth in the same hospital where I was being treated for cancer and the awful, awful way that we were treated. Really the way that she was treated and the way that they completely ignored all of our wishes.
All of them.
And did what they felt like doing, which, by the way, was not in the best interests of Janique nor our child, Satori.
Right. And then you're supposed to be grateful after.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so anyway, that was my experience of really learning to develop a sense of, this is what it's like to be in that position, the one down position versus the one up position. Yeah. And I think just about everybody out there has had that experience. So use that as your lever to develop more empathy, more compassion. Yeah. And then use that empathy and compassion to change how you relate with other people.
Totally. Thanks, babe.
Yeah.
So I think the majority of listeners out there are women, probably mostly moms, maybe stay-at-home moms that are between like the ages of 25 and 45. And if you're listening, I think we are sometimes confused as to how to go about these systems, these medical models and stuff, because we haven't had a lot of modeling for us. Before we recorded, in a text thread, we're trying to come up with women in this space that aren't credentialed, right? Because if you're listening, there's a good chance that you don't have any credentials in the health space. You're not a doctor or a dietitian or anything like that. And I want you to know that that is okay. But it's interesting because, well, then where do we look? Where do we look to people that are modeling the way for us to show us how we can act, what we can do? Because women need women. Empowered women need to show other women how to be empowered. So where are we looking? Shannon, you brought up a really good example. Do you want to share who that was that you follow on Instagram? I follow her too, actually.
Yeah. On Instagram, her handle is Empowered Autoimmune. Her name is Allie. She's really inspiring and one of these people is just like bulletproof with her resources. Mm-hmm. She cites everything. Any claims or any statements, it's very well cited, very well researched. Mm-hmm. She's even a senior researcher for a wellness site called GreenMed Info. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which the mainstream medical world completely despises, by the way. Like right. They don't like GreenMed.
Google's pretty much taken down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Google like completely diverts all the traffic away from them.
I actually just read her recent article on GreenMed Info about autoimmune and how there's a natural use case for it and it's not this black and white bad thing. Mm-hmm. It is such an incredible article. Mm-hmm. She is brilliant and it took me hours to get through it, because I had to go and look up words that I didn't understand.
Yeah.
She is so intelligent.
She's really smart.
So great. And I think she's a wonderful resource for people looking for an example of like how to be just like really strong and empowered mm-hmm. and assert your intelligence, mm-hmm. On any subject.
Yeah.
Obviously fangirling a little bit over here, Janique, you're like one of my favorites. I look to you for all sorts of advice. And, I swear, when I first discovered your page, I sat and looked at every single highlight on your Instagram. And I'm like, I need to go out and buy. I even had my local pharmacy order cattle and chewables for my kids because
That's
of
so awesome.
one of your
gosh.
Stories. But I think like the most important thing, I personally am like a junkie for just like learn and look what other people are getting into and do my own research. But I think that the most empowering thing that any mom especially, but any parent or just person can do is dig in. It's like mm-hmm. just dive in and read conflicting opinions. Read yes. both sides of the story. Look at when you're considering some type of treatment or when you're considering a medication, look at, people that are pushing that, treatment or sponsoring it or saying you should do it. Mm-hmm. Do they have any vested interest? How big are their studies? How big is the sample size? And just maybe we can even create a little checklist for people who are like, I'm new into being my own healthcare advocate, but like, what are some things that you can just general principles you can apply to going deep down the rabbit hole on pretty much anything when it comes to your health? Because nobody is going to feel more confident than if they are their own expert, right? So, had I gone in when Jack had that CMV diagnosis saying, oh, well, then this other doctor that I follow on social media or this person that I said that I've seen, really, really intelligent person said this, and this. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be with the same conviction. And frankly, I'm probably going to be much more easily swayed than if I, in my gut, in my intuition, in my soul, know, like everything that I've read, everything that I've learned tells me that this is not the way that we're going to do this. Mm-hmm. Then you'll end up with a hospital transfer like I did versus being bullied into a treatment, right? Mm-hmm. And frankly, that's the better outcome.
Totally.
And you'll have much less regret.
Totally.
So
I get multiple women a week reach out to me and they say, you are so bold for saying what you're saying. Thank you. I'm too scared to do that. And if you're listening right now, because as women, we're people pleasers, right? Like we want to please everyone. Like we want to take up little space. We don't want to make waves. But what I want to say is like, sometimes it's worth making waves, like you have to make waves to take up more space. And that's okay. Like as women, we need to take up space and we need to make space for other women too. Cause like I said earlier, women need women, right? So let's allow for more space for women to be able to speak up for themselves and for others and to just really be bold. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's it. That's all I want to say.
I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this, but the false dichotomy that we're given as a society and that women are forced to choose between is you're either a people pleaser or you're a bitch.
Right.
It's true.
Isn't that terrible? It's
And-
like, can I be both?
Well, we really demonize. We want women to be so agreeable and so accessible.
Seriously.
Because we equate women with love.
Yeah.
We equate women with softness and kindness and delicacy. And, we kind of treat women like they should be these community emotional whores where
Right.
they're just constantly giving
Yeah.
and doing all this free emotional and mental labor for everyone else.
Yeah.
So for a woman to value herself enough
Yeah.
to know her limits and her own boundaries and for her to say no,
Yeah.
it's honestly dangerous to the whole system because the system is built upon her being constantly agreeable and accessible.
Yep.
So it's the most radical thing a woman can do is to say, no, this resource actually belongs to me.
Yeah.
Or I'm prioritizing myself first.
Exactly.
Or I disagree with you.
Yep.
Or I've done the research and this is the conclusion that I've come to. Or this is my body, not yours.
Yep. Exactly. And you guys, and I want to say this, like if people can't, because I was watching the Netflix special on Brené Brown, and she was talking about like when she went viral, and they say, don't read the comments. But then as soon as everyone left her house, like she went and read the comments and she just like sank into like this depression. And I had this like aha moment of like, if people can hate Brené Brown, they can hate me. Do you know what I mean? Because Brené Brown is the most agreeable person on the face of the planet. Like she is like
She's
next
fantastic.
to mother.
She's fantastic.
She's fantastic. Like who can hate her? And yet people do. And so like as women, we need to break that bubble of like, we have to please everyone because that will never, ever happen. So all we can do is please ourselves and attract people that are of that same vibration. You know what I mean? Like we can't attract those naysayers to us. Like they will be there. They'll always throw sticks. They'll always throw stones. Like don't give them power. You know what I mean? Like stand your ground, like take back your power, advocate for yourselves, and don't let anyone bully you out of getting educated. You don't have to have a medical degree to understand nutrition. You don't have to have a Ph.D. to understand what's going in your body. You don't have to have any kind of like 10 years worth of schooling to recognize that you're taking a medication and it makes you feel off. I can't tell you how many times women with like Hashimoto's, for instance, are on a thyroid medication and their doctor just says, oh, we need to up it because of your symptoms. And then they up it and they're like, I don't feel good. And the doctor's like, no, just sit it out. Like if you are one of these women, because so many women have thyroid issues, like if you like listen to your body, listen to your intuition and push back, you're allowed to push back. Your doctor doesn't have to dictate everything to you. And if they feel like they do, then you just need to fire them.
And honestly, keep fighting for health because it is not normal to be sick chronically.
It's not.
And we have completely normalized people just feeling off.
Right. Yeah.
It's totally normal. We've totally normalized that you just don't feel good and you have low energy and you're just stressed out. That's not normal.
It's not.
It's not normal and we shouldn't normalize it. We should be constantly optimizing our health and looking, even if we are in great health and we feel fantastic, how can we optimize? How can we improve?
Yeah.
How can we age better?
Yes.
How can we retain what we have and how can we spread this? How can we keep growing? How can we keep expanding?
The hot thing right now is anti-aging, right? There was that book called Lifespan, wasn't it? Where he talks about like the keys to stopping aging. I mean, obviously we're aging, but like there's things like nutrition and exercise that just really build your body back up and can help you feel younger. I know I feel better now than I did in my early 20s when I was in college, drinking chocolate milk every day. Okay, the BYU Creamery chocolate milk. All you Mormons out there listening, like you're all shaking your head yes, because that is like chocolate manna from
devil's
heaven.
chocolate milk.
Like it's so good. And I had about 1 or 2 of those a day. And then I also had my first root canal that semester.
Yep.
And like my first, like all of my nutrients was leached and then my whole body started falling apart. So I feel much better now in my 30s than I did in my 20s.
It's Mormon beer, that chocolate milk from the BYU Creamery. They actually do.
It is.
At BYU, they do Milktoberfest.
Do they really?
Yeah, while the rest of the world is doing Oktoberfest
No.
and destroying their livers with alcohol, the Mormons are destroying the rest of their gut with lactose.
Well, I mean, if
basically.
you can't do alcohol and coffee, you got to have some kind of like food coping. And
sugar and
Mormons
milk.
choose sugar.
Sugar and milk or soda.
Yeah.
You know, that's our culture's alcohol now. So back to like, if people can hate Brené Brown, they can hate you guys. Take up more space. It's okay. Like find women that are creating space for you and step in, like start getting involved, start educating yourself. And I just want to like take my hat off to all of you women out there that constantly message me and say, I have spent hours learning stuff on your page or on your podcast, and I'm changing our lives. And I'm talking to my doctor about this and I'm pushing back. Like, that is fantastic. But we need to keep modeling this for other women. We need to keep talking up about it, or speaking up about it. Sorry. Like, and showing other women that they can do it too.
Absolutely.
I don't want the last word here, but I do want to say something before we're done.
Yeah.
And primarily speaking to the men, but really speaking to anyone who holds power in these situations. So the credentialed women fall into this category too.
Yeah.
The thing about having power in a privilege oppression system is that it feels personal when that's challenged. And my invitation would be to really become aware of how you are taking it personally when people challenge your power, and try to let go of that and say, this isn't about me. And this is not an attack on my hard work. It's not an attack on what I've done to get myself here. Yeah. It's simply an attack on a system that is designed to keep some people away from the power as much as possible.
Right.
And you, as someone who holds power, has all of the ability in this situation to change things for the better and to make a world of difference for the person that you're interacting with, who has been in that system of oppression for so long and has been told by so many people that their voice is irrelevant. And you have the chance to change that for them. And if you can overcome your ego, if you can overcome that knee-jerk reaction that tells you, I hate this doesn't feel good. Yeah. And if you can sit through the burning in your face that tells you you hate this, you can change everything for the better, and you will be so incredibly appreciated for that.
Yep.
That's my invitation.
That. Yeah, I love that.
I'll take the last word then.
Thanks, Liza.
Because on the opposite side of that, growing up in this system, I was taught to constantly outsource my power. And so during my second pregnancy, when we decided to do a home birth and switch to a midwife, I had several moments that created very uncomfortable situations because my midwife was requesting for me to take power that I had never exercised or developed. And it was scary and fearful. And so on the flip side of this, we have plenty of people who have grown up in systems from childhood where they have not learned how to say no, how to say yes, how to listen to themselves, how to advocate for themselves. And so when they're in that situation where someone is requesting that they have a voice and they have a limit and they have a boundary, or they have a question, or they have a need, especially in a vulnerable situation like disease or birth, or something that kind of puts you off of your natural strong A game.
Yeah.
When you're feeling a little bit weary or run down from life and you need help, the worst thing we can do is to take people in these situations where they need support and they need help and take their power in that vulnerable situation.
Totally.
What we should be doing is advocating to pause, slow down, don't rush through healing, don't rush through your appointments, don't rush through anything that's going on. Pause, slow down, take the time to listen and take the time to speak. Because these are the delicate moments where we have an opportunity to heal or create trauma.
Yep.
And that has lasting effects on our relationships and on the future generation.
Yep.
So it's very, very, very important that if you have been taught that your acceptance in your family system or in your tribal system is that you constantly outsource your power, you're going to make the people around you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And you're on double whammy, where you have to not only learn how to show up for yourself, but you learn how to deal with other people's negative, uncomfortable emotions, where they're going to want to shut you down or gaslight you or minimize you or And so you have these double attacks.
Yeah.
So find the people who will help support you through that process as you grow and step into higher vibrancy and higher health, where you can trust your voice, you can trust your experience, and you can develop confidence.
Yes, I love that.
I love that too.
I want to say one last thing, and then I want Shannon to say one last thing. But also, moms out there that are advocating for your children, always go with your gut. You know what I mean? Like, just if there is something that doesn't feel right, there's no other person out there that knows your child as well as you do. Like, trust that intuition, that mom instinct, and keep pushing and keep advocating for your children, because that is so important. I know we've been talking a lot about advocating for ourselves, but like, our children mean everything to us, and we birthed them. We know their every inch and like their every nook and cranny on their body. You know what I mean? Like,
we know their patterns. We know their behavior. We know how they are experiencing their world. And so when we go to a doctor's office and we say, my child has changed behavior, they're in a stressful situation.
Yep.
Don't let your doctor gaslight you and minimize that your child is different.
Yes.
That your child is going through something and that your child needs more support. And
don't be too scared to reach out to online communities of like-minded moms who are trying to find information. We all have to be information rats together and for each other, and kind of tag each other and be like, hey, can you help me with this? Has anyone experienced this? Because I guarantee you someone has, and someone has found some answers that can help you. So let's help each other. Like, we don't have to follow the system anymore. Like, we are intelligent and we are very capable, and we don't have to have fancy initials behind our names to do these things. Shannon, what words of advice do you have to listeners before we close out?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. I just listening to both of you speak, or all of you speak. I'm like, oh, this is such a great parting wisdom. I think the one thing that has been really relevant for me recently is not being afraid to be wrong.
Yes.
And I think one thing that has just been so freeing for me and has opened up so many things for me in sharing and being vulnerable is like, I have no egoic or identity attachment with the things that I'm saying.
Yeah.
So if I'm saying something controversial and somebody says to me, you're totally wrong about this, or that source that you cited, here's all of these different conflicts of interest that they have, and you're such a hypocrite, or whatever. For me, it's, wow, thank you for bringing that to my attention. And now I'm going to go deeper and see, like, what was I wrong about this? And I think it's when we identify too closely with our beliefs that it becomes scary to hold any belief, right? And that's when you're outsourcing all of your power.
Yes.
If you embrace that you are on a journey, you embrace that you have access, via the internet and select search engines, you have the access to a world of information, and that you might get it wrong, and that will be okay.
Totally.
You are free. And that is my advice, is don't be afraid to be wrong. Don't be, I would say, be fearful of people who are afraid to be wrong sometimes, so that's really it.
Thank you. To you listeners out there, the world is changing. Like, this medical model that we have is breaking, and it's okay to invite that change. It's okay to be the head of our own health, and our doctors do not have to delegate wellness to us anymore. And so what I want to tell everyone is just to lean into that and embrace it, and to move forward and to empower and educate, because this is the new movement. And I want everyone to see that it's coming, because we're tired. We're sick. We're literally sick, and we're tired. We're tired of how things have been. We're tired of how we have been kept in a corner. And so just allow yourselves to take up more space. Be okay being scared. Because you have to be scared in order for it to be bravery, right? And so be okay being scared, move forward, empower, and take up space, because it is going to change, but it requires us taking up that space for the change to come. It's coming. It's coming slower. I mean, it's coming slowly, but it will be faster the more women stand up to this. So thank you for sitting with us, taking space with us, and listening to these messages. Shannon, thank you so much for calling in. Liza, thank you so much for all both you ladies are just fantastic. And I really look up to you both so much. And thanks.
And I look up to all of you.
And we love you, Tristan, and we look up to you too.
Where's my cookie?
Sugar-free.
Exactly.
Sugar-free.
Okay, thanks you guys.